Welcome. I'm Peter Janowsky of the Ryan and Janowsky Financial Strategies Group. This is John Ryan, and we're here with another episode of Project S.A.F E, Seniors Against Financial Exploitation. Today's guest is Marcus O'Toole, who is an attorney that practices elder law and estate planning. And he's with us here now, and John, I think we need to get started.
Hello, Marcus.
And
thank you for joining on this episode of Project S.A.F E, Seniors Against Financial Exploitation. We have a saying, Peter and I, that no choice is a choice. And I don't know how it came about, to be honest with you, but oftentimes you'll have a senior that are going to take care of something tomorrow, and then unfortunately they fall, they get hurt, something happens, and what they hoped they were going to do with their money is not going to happen anymore, because they didn't change the titling of something that they wanted to, they didn't put something into a trust, they didn't put it in their will. Whatever the situation, we push people, if there's something that needs to be done, do it today. You can't put it off, and if you put it off, that means you don't care. That's just my personal, the way I look at it. Because you come back a year later, it's too late. Let's start with some of the basics. The first thing I think an individual, a senior, should have is a power of attorney. But that also could be a dangerous thing.
Right, so a power of attorney is a document where you would name someone to make financial decisions for you, such as day-to-day things. Could be help you paying the bills, pay your taxes, making sure all your investments are managed properly. So it's that's the common use. As you get older, you need a little help, and beyond just I'm going to put my friend or relative on my checking account to write checks for me.
Right. Okay.
A power of attorney lets them do just about anything you can do. To really help that, if in the future you really struggle taking care of things yourself, you have someone lined up. This is who I want to take care of things for me.
Okay.
And you can have backups, and you can have more than one person at a time. But it's really important to have that, because like you said, if you don't have it, there's the default, right? And for finances in New York, if you don't have a power of attorney and you're unable to take care of your finances yourself, the only option is guardianship, right? So if you're living alone and no one's helping you, and eventually you fall and you end up in a hospital, in a nursing home, nobody's taking care of your finances, things need to get paid, insurance needs to be taken care of, someone's going to file a guardianship, and then you're not going to necessarily have a say in who's going to be running your finances for you.
Okay. If you have family members, you're not married, you're a widow, but you have a couple of adult children, etc., you have a sister, you have a brother, whatever it's going to be, do they have a right to step in, or it's strictly a guardianship, or does the court turn around and say, yes, you have a sister, you have a son, he can take over?
Well, I mean, the court's going to usually prefer family members.
Okay.
So if for instance, the senior ended up in a nursing home and they filed for a guardianship, all of your close relatives that they know about, they're going to get notice, and they can come forward and say, look, I'm ready to take care of things.
Okay.
But it's a very burdensome process. Guardianship involves a lot of people knowing all of your personal business, financial, medical, court personnel, the court appoints an evaluator, outside people. It's a very unpleasant process. You might have to be dragged to court. You don't really want to go that route. So it can avoid a lot of expense and unpleasantness and aggravation if you select who you want to be your agent, rather than relying on somebody stepping forward maybe in the future. And if nobody steps forward, a court's going to appoint an independent agency or nonprofit, and their quality level varies.
Okay. Well, again, we go back to what we're saying. You need a trusted person in your life.
Yeah.
And so that trusted person would be the person you would designate as the agent on your power of attorney.
Right. So you want to be careful when you're selecting a power of attorney that it's someone you trust. It's a very powerful document. For the most part, if done properly, it lets them do just about anything that you could do with finances.
Okay.
Which is necessary if somebody's going to help you really manage yourself. You want that person to have a power, but you want to be someone trustworthy, because they could really go into your bank account and do whatever they want with it.
I have a question. Is there a big difference between regular power of attorney and a durable power of attorney?
Sure. So most powers of attorney these days are durable, meaning if you become incapacitated later, whether it's dementia or an accident or something, then it's still in existence, right? Whereas many years ago, sometimes you'd have a power of attorney that only lasted while you were still with it, and then once you lost capacity, it would end. But that really doesn't serve a whole lot of purpose these days. I mean, you use a power of attorney, so if you couldn't take care of it, somebody could take care of it for you. So that's what it means by durable. It lasts through incapacity.
And and just like to point out to the viewers, as far as our business is concerned, we have our own forms for power of attorney.
Right.
And even though an attorney could draw up a durable power of attorney and submit it to us, like most financial institutions, it may take a week, maybe several weeks before it goes to the back office and gets recognized. So what I recommend to people, if there's an institution that accepts their own form, like if a client wants their child to have power of attorney to make a trade, send a check, something like that, it gets recognized much quicker, almost overnight.
Most banks and financial institutions
they'll have their own
form.
Right.
Simple form that has to be notarized. That's
Right.
it.
So what we usually recommend is, so you go to an attorney and you do a general power of attorney that would apply to all your assets. They could, if they needed to do real estate transactions, pay taxes, whatever. And then each of your existing accounts, you should contact them and submit the one you've got to add them to the account. But say, do you have, a particular one that you have, an internal one, so that they have both, so that there's no issues later when maybe you've lost capacity and you can't sign a new one, that they already know, the bank, the investment firm, they already have that person on file as authorized to do transactions for you.
Right.
Okay. We're going to move through this list because it's big. Healthcare proxies.
Right.
That's important.
Yeah.
Also argumentative. It can be.
Well,
A confrontation, whatever the word would be.
It's a healthcare proxy is a document naming someone to make medical decisions for you, right? So power of attorney was for finances. Healthcare proxy is for medical decisions. They can be the same people, but not necessarily. Maybe you have certain children or relatives that are better with money, and then someone that's a nurse you want to make healthcare decisions for you. So the healthcare proxy only is triggered if the doctors believe that you can't make the decision for yourself, right? In contrast to a power of attorney, which is usually active right away, a healthcare proxy, you're in the hospital, you're at the doctor's office, and the doctor knows, you're no longer capable of making your own decisions. Who do I call to make these decisions for me? So, it's a different consideration of, I'm not giving someone's power that they could go and empty my bank account tomorrow. That's a power of attorney. So it's a more personal, but it's very different than finances. So sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different, but it's better to have that because, again, like you said before, doing nothing is doing something.
Right.
There's default rules in New York that say, if you're married, your spouse gets to make the decisions. If you have children, it's all of them. So you could have disagreements and conflict.
And that's what you want to avoid, because disagreements and conflicts are fine if they get worked out.
Right.
Sometimes it's a fight for life.
Right.
Because you said do this for mommy and I said do something different.
Right.
And then it's take off the gloves or put on the gloves, whatever the expression is, it's a disaster. Whereas you sit down and you pick one or two people, whoever it's going to be, as your healthcare proxy, and that's the decision.
Right.
Because, and I say this all the time when we do seminars and stuff, your children. The one that's going to be argumentative, the one that's going to go along with your wishes, the one that's going to fight you.
Right.
Why leave this up for grabs after you're gone?
Right.
And
this is going to be, it could be an important decision that needs to be made quickly. Right. It's medical decisions, whether to have surgery or not, whether to have a particular procedure, take a particular medication. You don't want a committee of people that are having to decide these things and having fights and gets delayed.
Have a pizza party over mom,
Right. This is literally life and death.
I agree. 100%.
So you want to say, okay, I want this person to make these decisions. Now you can have backups or alternates if your child or whoever you picked wasn't available.
Right.
But it's important. You want to take the time while you're fine, while you're okay, to be able to make a decision, say, this is who I want.
Right. And this goes back to when I opened this with Peter, saying no choice is a choice. These are not things, if people could come back the day after they died, or a year after they died, and see the mess that they've left by not just using their head. You didn't want to do it, but you put off, and sometimes it's difficult. You don't want to make the decision, and you don't want to say it's the end of my life and I have to be making these choices.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want to be responsible for tearing a family apart.
Right.
But your family. And I repeat it over and over. We have clients come in, it's like, you know what you're dealing with. And that's not a matter of not loving them. You have two brothers, two sisters, whatever you're going to have, 10, 15, everybody's a different personality. You got to work with them.
Right.
And there's always going to be, not always, but oftentimes there's going to be that one thorn in any bush that you got to deal with it.
Right.
In an effort to mitigate scams and the senior being taken advantage of and making poor choices, I believe that's where trust can come into play. So they can get what they wish, but then done properly. You don't want to give a house to your son hoping he'll take care of you to find out he remarries a couple of years down the road and says, Ma, you're gone. Because he dies and now his new wife inherits the house.
Right.
And it's like, well, this wasn't the plan 5 years ago when we were giving it to Johnny.
Right.
That, I think, is what we're trying to get at now, is the importance of trusts. And I know it's confusing for some people, irrevocable versus revocable.
Right.
I know you can't give this is the best for that, but it's just a general overview of what people should be looking for, the seniors, to put their house in order, to try to find the most comfort everyday living, but be secure in the fact that their house is being taken care of, or their finances, whatever it is.
Right. So a lot of people, they hear stories about, as I get older, if I got sick long term, someone's going to come take my house.
Right.
The government's going to come take it, a nursing home's going to take it. My care is going to cost so much money. Let me just give my house to my children, right? They'll take care of me, et cetera. It's a good thought. You want planning for the future,
right?
But there's better ways to do it. A trust, and there's a couple of different types, is a much better way to do it than just giving everything to your children. Because, maybe you have a great relationship with, your daughter or your son, and say, okay, here, I'm going to give you my house. And this happened to me the other day. A woman came in and said, I gave my house to my daughter a couple of years ago. She said, I'm going to take care of you. I'll pay for everything, etc. The daughter was married at the time. And then, a few months later, the daughter lost her job, had some financial problems, took out a mortgage on the house, was using it for her to live. And then a couple years later, she was getting divorced, and she was going to have to sell the house.
Oh, boy.
Because you're getting divorced, they need money, they got to sell the house, he gets a piece. And, the mother-daughter relationship fractured. And the daughter was like,
nicely.
That's
right, because mom was living in like an extension in the house, and because she wanted that family atmosphere. I want to be like when you were growing up, Susie or whatever her name was.
Right, okay.
I want to live and we can have family dinner together. So I'll just give you the house. Well, now the daughter's getting divorced. The house is going to be sold, and the mother, she can't get her money back. So I caution people, if you just give a house, money, or whatever to your children, hoping they'll take care of you, if something goes wrong, one, you can't get it back legally for the most part.
Right.
And two, if they have their own creditors or divorce problems, they could even lose control over some of it.
I want to interject for one thing. This woman that you're talking about who took the loan on the house, this wasn't even a scam. She needed some money. I'm sure she might even figured out I'll be able to pay it back. Yeah. Mommy won't even know. It doesn't affect anything. Right. There's consequences to everything we do. Right. But in this case, maybe she was a thief, but I'm going to go with she was a wonderful person. Said I need $50,000, but over the next couple of years I'll pay you off the mortgage. Yeah. Nobody will know. Nothing's changed.
Right.
And if Mommy dies, it's my house anyway. We are all in good shape.
Right. So and there were some other siblings who I think that the mother intended that, when we're gone, she's going to share things.
Right.
But life changes.
Right.
People lose a job, financial distress, divorce. It can really ruin that. So a better way to do it, you want to protect your assets. So look, if I got sick in the future and needed a nursing home or home health care aides, I would like, some government assistance to pay for it. So I need to get some assets out of my name. The better way is to do it in an irrevocable trust.
Okay.
Okay, and there's a particular type of irrevocable trust that helps you qualify for Medicaid, which we could talk about more details, but that's a state program that would pay for these things. But by putting it into a trust, you still have some level of control, right? So,
just before you go on with trust, I know this is an interruption, would you give out your phone number? Because
sure.
Somebody's watching this and is confused. We do other shows, we've had other episodes. Mm-hmm. You give out the number, the person can turn around and say, you were talking about this, Mark, because I don't understand what you meant.
Right. It's 631-390-5000. All right.
391-5000. 390.
390-5000.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure. So by putting it into a trust, you, first off, this particular type of trust for Medicaid qualifying, you know, the house can't be sold without your consent. You have to live there for your whole life, can't kick you out. You can change the inheritance. So just because you put it in this trust doesn't mean you can't say, well, I don't like this person, things have changed, I need to provide specially for this person. You know, you still have control over inheritance. And in this type of trust, you can't appoint yourself as trustee, but you can appoint children or relatives or whomever, and you can also change them whenever you want. So it allows some level of control over the trust and doesn't fall into the situation where you just gave it to someone and you have no say in what happens, and it's subject to all their creditors and all that kind of stuff. So as long as you're still alive, you still have, you know, a strong level of control over that while still accomplishing your planning objectives.
So from an estate perspective, the money's out of your name, the asset is out of your name.
Right.
So you're covered there. You cannot take it back, the asset.
Well, you can take it back if everybody consents,
right,
if you do it in the right way. So the purpose of an irrevocable trust is to say, okay, it's no longer mine for qualifying for government help for, you know, medical care, but I can't go in by myself and just go take it back. Right?
Right.
If you could just go take it back, the government say, well, go take it back and, you know, sell it and pay for your care. So by placing it, you know, across the line where you only have some control, not full control, government says, okay, well, that's not really yours anymore, so, you know, we'll come in and cover your care for you. But I think the important thing when it comes to doing a trust is to do it sooner rather than later.
Right.
Because, again, not doing anything is a choice. The government has put in place certain restrictions where, you know, there's a 5-year look-back period, they call it. So if you're applying for benefits to pay for a nursing home, you know, any transfers you made in the last 5 years count against you. So it's important to do the trust while you're healthy, and you're going to maximize the amount of assets you can protect. Now, if you needed a nursing home tomorrow, that doesn't mean you can't do anything, but you're going to get the best protection, you know, if you do it in advance.
Okay. In that trust, you can put your home, but you can also put assets. You could put your accounts. You could put
Investments,
etc.
Right. So you can put cash. You can put your house. For most families, you know, it's the home is their largest asset. You don't usually put retirement accounts, you know, into these trusts because they usually don't count as an asset. So let me back up a little bit so people get understanding of why you need the trust and what you're qualifying for. So, you know, as you get older, if you get ill and you needed long-term medical care, you know, you have Medicare insurance and probably a supplemental policy.
Right.
You know, once you're 65, you know, you apply for Medicare, A, B, C, D, et cetera, and they cover prescriptions and surgeries and doctor's visits and your normal medical care. But it doesn't cover a long-term stay in a nursing home, and it doesn't cover long-term home health care aids. Separately from Medicare is Medicaid, which is run by the state and the county, which does cover those things, but it has financial limitations, right? So Medicare, you just need to be 65. But to get Medicaid to pay for a nursing home, you need to have less than about $15,000 in your name when you're applying. So, you know, it's important to get assets out of your name in the proper way so that, you know, 5 years from now, if you needed care, you know, they're not counted as your assets and they'll step in and pay. You know, what counts as an asset varies, but usually your house, your cash accounts, those are the things you want to protect, put in the trust, because for the most part, retirement accounts, you know, aren't counted toward that, you know, $15,000 maximum.
I don't know if you have this answer, and if this comes under you or from an accountant perspective. Just make an argument, the person has a $100,000 IRA, okay? And they're taking their minimum distribution, or whatever the percentage happens to be that year.
Otherwise known as RMDs.
Right, they're RMD.
Required minimum distribution.
They go into that's the only thing they have. So could they be on Medicaid?
Yes, so because that doesn't count as a resource for Medicaid purposes, they would be able to go on Medicaid. However, once you go on Medicaid, you have to contribute some of your income toward your care, and Medicaid pays the rest. So a very rudimentary example is say you earn say your care is $5,000 a month.
Okay.
You know, you're having home health care aides, et cetera. You know, and after the exemptions and allowances, say your net income after that is $1,500, right?
Okay.
So you contribute your $1,500, you know, and then Medicaid pays the other $3,500. So,
Okay.
you know, the IRA or retirement asset would not count. You know, if you had $100,000, the $100,000 wouldn't count, but your RMDs, you would usually have to contribute toward your care, and Medicaid has their own calculation for that.
Okay, so they'll figure
it's
it
a
out.
little,
For RMD.
it's a little bit
Right.
more. Well, it could be a lot more,
Right.
but you know, they have their own chart for how much you have to take out. You contribute that, and then Medicaid pays for the rest.
And then on death, what happens to the remainder in the IRA?
Well,
Is that goes to the state, or that goes?
No, it goes to whoever you designate.
Oh, it does. A beneficiary.
The
Okay.
beneficiary.
Right.
Okay.
So, you know, an IRA and lots of bank accounts, if you name beneficiaries on them, you know, regardless of what your will says, and we can talk
Right.
about that eventually, that goes to those people. So when you open up an IRA, you fill out who is my primary beneficiary.
Right. Oh, I just didn't know if the
Yeah.
state would come in and say, okay, but we've been taking care of
No.
you.
Right.
We'll take the balance of that
Retirement
account.
assets are exempt
Wow.
from
Okay.
that.
Except RMDs could be accelerated. That's what
Yes.
you're saying. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Very good.
We're not going to have a lot more time, so let's touch on a will. The difference, what you were saying when you just brought that up, the IRA
Right.
is outside the will because it's a beneficiary.
Right.
The difference of what's in a will and what's out of a will.
Right. So your last will and testament is how you say, okay, when I pass away, here's how I want my assets to be divided amongst my children, my spouse, whomever. However, if you have assets that you are specifically named to go to certain people, or they're joint with someone, it doesn't matter what your will says for the most part, it just goes to those people.
Right.
So that's common life insurance, annuities, IRAs, 401ks. You know, those are frequently, when you open them, they say, who do you want these to go to? You fill it in, you put their social security number, sign here.
Right.
You can always change that later. Call up, you know, your life insurance carrier and said, I need a new beneficiary form. But regardless of what your will says, that's who's going to get it. So, you know, you come in and you do a will that's going to say, okay, when I pass away, my house is going to go to so-and-so and my cash is going to go to so-and-so. You also want to make sure that your beneficiary designations weren't the ones you did 30 years ago when you were married to someone else or when you had 2 children instead of 4. So it's something to check up on every once in a while, you know, to make sure that it's still, that's who I want the accounts to go to.
Makes sense. And then what happens too, but every financial institution has to have the spouse sign off on it now.
Right.
So if I have my wife as my beneficiary, but I wanted to make Peter my beneficiary,
Right.
she has to approve it.
Right.
Because all of a sudden the time comes, I'm going to stick it out with you because eventually you're going to die and I'm going to get the money to find out that the annuities, the insurance policies, and all those designated type investments
Right.
were out of
Right,
the name.
so-
And that happened years ago to people.
Right. So most accounts that are retirement based or that are tax advantaged, under federal law, they are required to, you know, if you want to change the beneficiary, the spouse has to consent. So that's usually going to be your IRAs, qualified annuities, things like that. There's even a little box on the beneficiary form. If you're married, your spouse must sign here.
Right.
So, you know, you want to make sure that if you want to try to change it to someone else, you talk to your spouse first.
Right.
And make sure you get it. Otherwise, it's just not going to be valid, and the spouse is going to be entitled to it because, you know, the Congress and the local legislators have decided, you know, you can't just cut off your spouse and not give them anything.
Right, I agree. And I say that since there's not a lot of time, and you see it too, you have to stress for a senior to take their time after the death of someone.
Yeah.
You know, all too often you get all this paperwork done and it's all done perfectly and you've had the durable powers of attorney, but now you don't need it anymore because the person's dead.
Right.
And the healthcare proxies. So now you got to the will and then all of a sudden everything has to be rushed. Nothing has to be rushed.
No.
Take your time to grieve and reflect and get yourself organized because all too often they start pushing the buttons and this is supposed to happen and it's just a mess. They close accounts and then a check comes. You have no place to deposit it now. And it's a joint check that you didn't pay attention when somebody owed you money, but they go running around trying to get things done just, you know.
There's no rush. You know, things take time. An estate is something that can take months, a year to settle. There's really no rush. You know, there's things naturally that take a while, like Social Security. You know, a check goes in. You know, they get notified of someone's passing. You know, sometime later, and they gotta take some, they might have to take a month back.
Right,
so
right,
these
okay.
things take time. It's fine to contact, the pension company, Social Security, whatever. It's fine, but there's really no rush. Nothing terrible is going to happen in the short term.
Right.
Especially, if you're married and you have a joint account, well, you still keep doing what you're doing. You can still write checks. It's still your account. Everything. A lot of people have automatic withdrawals. Things are still going to be going. There's you don't need to probate your will tomorrow. Everything's going to be all right. Take your time to grieve.
Is there a time frame on that? I'm just curious.
No, there's no deadlines to do any of that. It's just, I wouldn't wait a year, but it's not like the next week you have to go see your lawyer.
Right, okay.
So for most families who don't have some sort of exotic investments that need constant tweaking, take your time and when you're ready.
I'm just to get this right, the whole purpose of probate is just to see if there's any claims on the estate, correct?
Probate is the process which you write a will, you sign it, and then you pass away. In order for it to be effective, a judge has to say, yes, that's the valid will.
Okay.
So probate is the process by which you submit it to the court and the surrogates court in each county in New York, and they say, yes, that's a valid will, sign me, and so-and-so is appointed as executor. So then once you're appointed executor, then you have authority to transact for the deceased person's financial assets if they didn't have beneficiaries. If they had just some account or real estate or something like that, you need to get appointed by the court first, and probate is just the process by which, you do that.
And if a person has nothing?
Right, so if a person, if all their assets are joint and have beneficiaries, you don't need to probate anything.
Right.
Or if you put everything in your trust.
Right, if you've given it all away.
Right, so if you have everything lined up perfectly and you have beneficiaries, you have trusts, everything like that, you might not even need to probate the will.
Right, okay.
Now, you should always do a will because you never know. You could have missed something, you inherit something, things change. But you might not need to go through the process of probate.
Perfect.
We're going to have to wrap up real soon.
Okay,
so if they have one last question.
No, we're good. Another question is going to take. We'll have to do another show.
We'll have to do another show, absolutely.
Versus another question.
Right.
All right, so I'm going to thank Marcus O'Toole for being with us. And once again, Marcus's phone number is 631-390-5000. I'm Peter Janowsky. This is John Ryan. This has been another episode of Project SAFE, Seniors Against Financial Exploitation. And if anybody wants us to come out and give a presentation in front of their social group, business organization, place of worship, could be a community center, you could call us at 516-719-6396. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.